It is October 12th, 1891 in Tokyo. The city is a bustling mix of old Edo streets and new Meiji modernisation. Horse-drawn carriages jostle alongside rickshaws, steam trains whistle in the distance, factories hum, and the scent of tatami and incense mingles with coal smoke. Inside a grand aristocratic home, part palace, part mansion, Fumimaro Konoe is born, one of the most prestigious noble families in Japan. His mother, young and delicate, though tragically she will die soon after his birth. His father, Atsumaro, is a politically active aristocrat, deeply involved in the shifting currents of Meiji-era politics. Konoe grows up surrounded by servants, tutors, and the weight of history. His early schooling takes place at Taimei Elementary, a private school for the children of the nobility, where manners and literacy are as important as academics. From there, he moves to Gakushuin, a school dedicated to educating the children of Japan's elite, where he learns both the classics and the modern world. For university, he chooses a path unusual for someone of his rank. He studies philosophy at Tokyo Imperial University, then law at Kyoto Imperial University. He studies alongside children of the nobility, but also rubs shoulders with young intellectuals who challenge his worldview. He discovers socialism, translates Oscar Wilde's The Soul of Man under socialism, and begins forming ideas that will later influence his political career. Yet despite his modern education and intellectual curiosity, Konoe's life is shaped by duty, privilege, and the unspoken expectations of a family that has led Japan for centuries. The stage is set for a man caught between tradition, modernity, and a nation on the brink of upheaval. By the 1930s, Japan is a nation tense with ambition and anxiety. Militarism grows in every corner of society. The scars of the Great Depression, combined with Japan's need for raw materials, push the military and government leaders toward expansion. China, rich in land and resources, becomes the target. Fumimaro Konoe, now a young aristocrat in his 40s, is perfectly positioned. He did not claw his way up through elections or popular support. His rise is nepotism at its core. He inherits influence from a family that has shaped Japan for centuries. The Konoe family belongs to the elite Fujiwara lineage, historically close to the emperor. When his mentor, the aging statesman Saionji Kinmochi, endorses him, the path to power is virtually cleared. In 1937, the Marco Polo Bridge incident erupts near Beijing. Skirmishes between Japanese and Chinese troops spiral out of control. The military, sensing opportunity, prepares for full-scale invasion. Konoe, now Prime Minister, does not command armies in the field, but as the head of government, he presides over the machinery that sends soldiers into China. He is a man of contradictions. Despite his aristocratic upbringing and liberal education, he aligns himself with ultranationalist and militaristic factions. He pushes through the state general mobilization law, giving the government unprecedented control over civilians and industry, transforming Japan into a totalitarian state almost overnight. And yet the truth is simple. Konoe's authority is largely inherited and facilitated by family ties. His wealth, connections, and the trust of Emperor Hirohito allow him to run a country and its invasion of China, not because he is universally admired or voted in, but because he belongs to the right family at the right moment. By late 1937, Japanese troops capture Nanjing. What follows is a campaign marked by military success and horrendous atrocities. Konoe, sitting in Tokyo, sanctions policies that escalate the war. He negotiates with generals and foreign ministers, carefully balancing power, influence, and the expectations of the emperor. It is July 1940. Japan hums with a nervous energy. Across the capital, Tokyo's streets are crowded with businessmen, soldiers, and school children, all moving under the shadow of a government tightening its grip. Fumimaro Konoe steps into the Prime Minister's office for the second time. He is a man both respected and feared, not for his charisma, but for the sheer weight of his family lineage and imperial favour. Konoe does not just inherit his position, he manipulates it, using his connections to consolidate control. He forms the Imperial Rule Assistance Association, a political body meant to erase party politics and unify the nation under his leadership. The rhetoric is grand: national unity, economic strength, moral duty. But the reality is blunt. It is a tool to mobilize Japan for war. Meanwhile, Konoe faces the greatest pressure of his career. The military pushes relentlessly. The invasion of French Indochina is underway. Supplies of oil and materials are limited. And across the Pacific, the United States watches with suspicion. Konoe negotiates with American diplomats, trying to thread a needle, promise peace, avoid confrontation, but also satisfy the military hawks who see delay as weakness. Konoe's talent is not in war strategy, but in political survival. He juggles generals, ministers, and the emperor himself, presenting calm in public while private meetings are tense and fractious. Navy officers worry about the odds against the US. Army officers demand expansion into China and beyond. Konoe tries to steer between them, but the currents are too strong. In these moments, the listener senses a man trapped by circumstance. He wants diplomacy. He wants Japan to avoid disaster, yet he is shackled by a system that equates compromise with failure. He writes letters, meets envoys, and drafts proposals that might avert war. But the military ignores him, the clock ticks, and the world edges toward conflict. By October 1941, Konoe reaches his breaking point. He realizes that despite his heritage, his prestige, and his ties to the emperor, he cannot control the nation he governs. He resigns. 6 weeks later, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. The war he tried to restrain begins, and Konoe's ambitions, his dreams of measured diplomacy, are swept away in the tide of history. It is 1944, and the air in Tokyo feels heavy, thick with the tension of a war Japan can no longer control. Across the streets, newspapers trumpet victories long past, but the reality seeps through the cracks. Defeat is coming, and the people whisper of famine, of cities burned by air raids, of soldiers returning in coffins. Fumimaro Konoe sits in his office, the weight of decades of privilege pressing down on him. Once he was untouchable, the scion of the Konoe family, the head of the most prestigious noble house, a man whose advice shaped emperors and generals alike. Now he is a man ignored, bypassed, and overshadowed by the militarists he once tried to temper. The Tojo cabinet is crumbling. Japan has lost Saipan, and with it the illusion that the empire is invincible. In private, Konoe argues with ministers, with generals, with anyone who will listen. The war is unwinnable, the strategy flawed, the nation on the edge of ruin. His warnings are dismissed. To the army, defeat is never their fault, always the enemy's cleverness or the emperor's indecision. Konoe tries diplomacy again, this time behind closed doors with Emperor Hirohito. He urges a path to peace, a surrender before the country is utterly destroyed. The emperor listens politely, then retreats into the world of rituals and divine authority, seeming more concerned with prestige than survival. Konoe realizes what the listeners already sense. Even the throne, the ultimate symbol of Japan, will not save the people from their leader's hubris. The political scene is brutal. Young, ambitious generals and ministers plot, manipulate, and accuse. Konoe's allies shrink in influence. His enemies, the war hawks, grow stronger as desperation drives them to claim the moral high ground. Every decision Konoe once might have influenced is now dictated by fear, by inertia, by the machinery of war he helped empower. Konoe watches the empire he helped build unravel. Factories fail, supplies vanish, cities burn, and morale collapses. He sees students sent to fight, families starving, and he knows the blame will fall on the government, on the ministers, and yes, on him. But the real architects of this disaster are untouchable. The military elite, the fanatical strategists, the emperor who absorbed their counsel. By the end of 1944, Konoe is a shadow of the man who once negotiated at Versailles, who pushed the racial equality clause, who tried to steer Japan with a steady hand. He is isolated, politically neutered, and powerless. The machinery of state he once navigated with aristocratic ease now crushes him. The fall is total, the humiliation complete, and for the first time, the bitter taste of his mistakes, and the suffocating tension of a nation marching toward its darkest days. The war is over, but the weight of its consequences presses down on Fumimaro Konoe. The Allied occupation has begun, and he now serves in the cabinet of Prince Naruhiko Higashikuni, the first post-war government. Yet the shadow of suspicion hangs over him. The Americans, through Operation Blacklist, intend to hold Japanese leaders accountable, and Konoe, despite his attempts to moderate the country's path, is on the list. Konoe knows the humiliation awaiting him at Sugamo prison. A war crimes trial would expose him to ridicule, scrutiny, and the collapse of all the authority he has clung to his entire life. He prefers death to disgrace. On the night of the 15th of December 1945, he shares his room with his son, Michitaka. The young man searches the room for anything dangerous, poisons, weapons, but finds only a quiet tension. Father and son speak in hushed tones, shadows flickering against the walls. They talk about the invasion of China, the failed negotiations with the United States, and the crushing responsibility Konoe feels toward the emperor and the Japanese people. Under his son's urging, Konoe records his feelings in pencil, the strokes tentative yet deliberate. These scribbles are more than words. They are a man's final reckoning with his life, a personal confession that will never see the courtroom or the press. Michitaka, sensing the gravity of the night, apologizes to his father for failing in filial duty, fearing these may be their last moments together. Konoe, unflinching, rebuffs him quietly, his voice calm yet cold. What does to be filial mean? He turns away. Silence stretches between them, heavy and uncomfortable. The room seems to hold its breath. Michitaka finally tells his father to sleep and cautiously asks if he will leave for prison tomorrow. Konoe does not answer, but his gaze speaks volumes. In that look, Michitaka perceives a strange, distasteful expression he has never seen before. The quiet, resolute intention of a man ready to embrace death. Before dawn, Michitaka is awakened by his mother's anxious voice. Rushing to his father's room, he finds him stretched out, serene, as if merely asleep. Beside him lies an empty brownish bottle. The truth is undeniable. Fumimaro Konoe has ended his own life with potassium cyanide. The man who once wielded the levers of power, who navigated the treacherous corridors of politics and imperial ambition, is gone. His final act is silent, private, and chilling. A final refusal to face the judgment of the world, a last assertion of control over his destiny. Konoe is later laid to rest in the Konoe clan cemetery at the temple of Daitokuji in Kyoto. His story sealed away, remembered in whispers, in history books, and in the private grief of those who knew him.